The news at 5:30 starts now with DC's most accurate forecast team tracking Hurricane Fiona. Right now, most of Puerto Rico, as we've been telling you, is without power, and they don't have clean drinking water 2 days after Fiona just slammed the U.S. island, causing catastrophic damage and at least 2 deaths.
You see that high-level view with brown water surrounding them that they cannot consume. I mean, this is an emergency.
Yeah.
5 years ago today, another devastating storm, Hurricane Maria, rocked Puerto Rico. There were days and weeks with no clean water, no electricity, so this really must feel like deja vu. Meteorologist Caitlin McGrath has more on these 2 hurricanes 5 years apart, Caitlin.
That's right, Leslie. And oftentimes we do see these big hurricane anniversaries so closely timed to each other because high impact storms are just common this time of the year. The environment and the ocean are primed for significant tropical development. We are still very much in the peak of hurricane season. And it's hard to believe that parts of Puerto Rico are still recovering from Maria 5 years later. The storm made landfall as a devastating Category 4 storm, bringing large storm surge, very heavy rains, and powerful winds. The storms crippled the island's power grid and ultimately led to nearly 3,000 fatalities. I talked to Carlos Santos Burgoa, a professor of global health at George Washington University earlier today, to talk about the progress Puerto Rico has made since Maria.
A big lesson from Maria is that the systems were prepared for 2 or 3 days for a blackout, and blackout lasted weeks or months. So we have to make sure that really we have the capacity to take care of that.
But let's talk about some of the meteorological differences between Maria and Fiona, because Maria was a Category 4 hurricane, a major Category 4 storm, but you can see it passed in the far eastern part of Puerto Rico. Fiona, however, passed through the westernmost part of Puerto Rico, just to the west of a very mountainous region. So not only did you have the mountain influence to the east of the center of the storm, the heavy rain side of the storm, you also had the orographic uplift, the influence from the mountains. Whenever you have those strong winds into mountain ranges, it forces the air up and creates heavier rain. And that's how parts of Puerto Rico ended up with 20 to 30 inches of rain as Fiona rolled through on Sunday, and that rain continued throughout the day on Monday. Now, Fiona right now still working its way to the north of Turks and Caicos, and Topper talked about it earlier. It does look like the storm underwent eye wall replacement earlier today, which is very common in major hurricanes. Now, while that can temporarily weaken the storm, oftentimes it sets it up to re-intensify. So Fiona's still a major Category 3 storm, sustained winds of 115 miles per hour, moving to the north and west at 8 miles per hour, but the storm expected to strengthen into a Category 4 prior to passing to the west of Bermuda. And thankfully, we have seen that jog a little bit farther to the west throughout the day today. That puts Bermuda right on the fringe of that cone of uncertainty, missing the center of the storm. And hopefully we continue to see that tug a little bit farther to the west, because as we know, Bermuda, unfortunately, on the wrong side of this storm, that northeastern quadrant typically causes the most devastation in these storms. And as the storm continues to pull off to the north as we head into the weekend, it could impact the Canadian Maritimes as possibly a Category 1 storm. Thankfully, the National Hurricane Center does have it weakening now as it moves onshore Saturday afternoon. We're also watching Tropical Storm Gaston. This just formed with the 5 o'clock National Hurricane Center advisory. A pretty weak tropical storm, winds just 40 miles per hour and posing no threat to land, just going to move off to the north and east. The National Hurricane Center never strengthens it past a tropical storm as it continues to roll through over the next several days. Again, thankfully, no threat to land. What I'm more interested in is this tropical wave, still several hundred miles east of the Windward Islands. This has an 80% chance of development in the next 5 days. And right now, it does look like it should pass to the south of Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, but there is still a lot to determine here over the next several days. But what we do know is it's going to move into a more favorable environment for development, and this will likely become Hermine later this week.
All right. Thank you, Caitlin.